Live. Keep Leading Live, just like the Keep Leading podcast, is dedicated to leadership development and insights. I'm your host, Eddie Turner, the Leadership Accelerator. I work with leaders to accelerate performance and drive impact through the power of executive coaching, facilitation, and keynote speaking. Today, we're streaming live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Hit that share button so that your colleagues can be a part of our conversation or see the replay immediately after this session concludes. One of the biggest mistakes your organization is making is not about strategy, not about technology, not about market conditions, but rather about who you're hiring. Dr. David Cohen, my guest today, has spent 30 years advising leaders across 6 continents, and he's seen it time and again, that organizations hire for skill and fire for values. In this episode, he joins me to talk about his framework that is behind his latest book, Selecting the Best, Fostering a Workforce Driven by Values for Lasting Success. So listen to this conversation to understand why value-based hiring isn't just a nice idea, but a competitive advantage. To that end, Dr. Cohen, welcome to Keep Leading Live.
Thank you for inviting me again. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful.
Yes, again, that's right. You're one of my few repeat guests. Shame on me for not having pulled up the exact episode you were on before in my original broadcast of the Keep Leading podcast a few years ago. So what a pleasure to have you back. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada for the last 40 years. And I have worked with organizations, as you said, around the world on identifying what are the behaviors of their authentic values and how to integrate those into people practices. I started, the first aspect I did this many years ago was with helping an organization hire better through behavioral interviewing around behaviors. And it really has blossomed into one of the cornerstones of the work that I do in making sure that organizations have successful employee experiences and therefore retention and therefore high productivity. So it's kind of stuff I enjoy doing, get excited about it, and really see the benefit of it.
Excellent. And I should mention that you and I are also members of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches organization. Now, in full disclosure, indeed. Now, you've been a leadership practitioner and recognized in the organizational culture space since 1991. In fact, the Global Gurus has ranked you as one of the top 30 in the world in this area.
Yes.
You've been doing it for a long time. What motivated you to now put this particular book, Selecting the Best, together?
I had an experience with an organization in Corpus Christi, Texas, that was sort of a greenfield. It was a brand new plant that was opening up. I was called in before they even started construction to work with the team that was going to create it, the leadership team, on helping them define what would be their culture, what are their values, what are the behaviors that will define success as a member of that organization, a member of that team. Mm-hmm. And then I saw the benefit of them using that to grow the organization and how people responded. And it all came together. Everything that I've always talked about and said would happen, happened. And so I felt it was a great case study to put out there to show if you define the authentic behaviors, not the aspirational ones, but the true behaviors that drive people success, and you hire people to fit that, what will happen from the point of view of engagement, of people the experiences they have, and their commitment to the purpose of the organization and the success of one another and the organization. So it was really a culmination of the work I do around values and culture, combining it with the work I do around people and selection. And it was a marriage of the two that really proved this stuff really works.
Excellent. And there's a specific gap that your book fills in the marketplace.
I would say it fills a gap of twofold. It fills a gap of debunking this idea that it's wrong to hire for fit to culture because people misunderstand what culture is. So there's all this nuance of culture that says, you managers hire in their own image. People that graduate from the same school, that look like them, dress like them, talk like them, act like them, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's not culture. That's not what the organization's really about. And I kind of bust that myth in the beginning of the book, then say what culture really is about values. That's the foundation for the organization's culture. And you can come from any place in the world, any religious, non-religious background, and have similar belief systems, which make it a safer place to work. You can have healthy disagreement that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really levels the playing field to hire the right person for the right job. Because I learned a long time ago when I transitioned out of my education career into the consulting life,
Mm-hmm.
I was doing work on leadership, and I had to do research for this project I was working on. And I came to the conclusion that people are hired for their experience, education, and knowledge. They're promoted for their success, but invariably fired for their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did some research on that and interviewed quite a few people and found out that about 83% of people who were let go, of the 1,000 that we interviewed, 83% were let go because of behavior. Their
Mm-hmm.
skill and knowledge, their experience were dead on, but they just couldn't get along with people, or people couldn't get along with them, and differences would pop up and all sorts of other things. So behavior is the anchor for our success. If we get along with somebody and we know that person values what we value and they struggle, we'll help them. But if we have an animosity towards them for a variety of reasons and they struggle, we're not going to help them. We're not going to step in. So making sure that you identify those behaviors. And then over the years, I find out that words that people use, such as respect, doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in every company in the world. And respect has got its own nuance. And if you can understand the nuance for the values of your organization, what makes you different from others. And when people kind of say, well, is that really true? And I say, is the place you're working now different from the place you used to work?
Mm-hmm.
People invariably say, oh, yeah, I didn't like that place, or I don't like the place I'm at now because of the other place, whatever it might be. And I say, well, what are the value differences? And they say, well, on the wall, they were the same thing, but in practice, they're different. And I said, well, the idea is to get what's in practice on the wall. So we have a clear understanding of the pathway to success. And then you can create an interview that's specific to hiring people that fit the organization.
Well, you said along those lines, hey, you want to hire the right person for the right job. Here you're mentioning the idea of hiring the right person to fit the organization. And yet there may be some leaders who say, hey, I just want someone who can do the job. Tell us
You're right.
how that can be not the best reaction for the long-term success of both the employee and that organization.
Because it's great question. It's a common one, especially today with this push towards skills.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to hire for skills, which we did in the 50s and 60s. And that kind of backfired because in the long run, people, suffered through it because they didn't like to look for another job. So their life was miserable. Their life was cut short, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Productivity wasn't at the level it should be. So when we hire for skill alone without realizing the fit to behavior, we can get the job done, but it doesn't mean that the job's going to be done right for everybody.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that there's going to be innovation. It doesn't mean that there's going to be a healthy disagreement, because when everybody agrees with each other or pretends they agree because they're too afraid to speak up
Right.
and challenge the expert, you get no movement forward. So hiring somebody who has behaviors that don't fit the organization stifles the organization's growth.
So, David, are you saying that groupthink is not necessarily a good thing?
No, groupthink is usually pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
And we have examples throughout history where groupthink becomes a real problem.
Indeed. Yeah, and that's the reason the famous book by Doris Kearns Goodwin, the historian, about Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president of the United States, says he had a team of rivals. And that was because he didn't want everyone to necessarily agree. He wanted that divergent thinking to percolate, and therefore help in making a fuller decision that would be in the best outcome of everyone.
And you see that. I mean, you see that in organizations that are successful. The leadership team, it's interesting because everybody, goes with this team building stuff of forming, storming, norming, and performing. Getting along is not a sign of norming and performing. Getting along could be a subtle sign you're still storming because people aren't speaking up. People are having cliques. So when there's healthy disagreement, that's when you're performing and you're moving forward and you're getting new ideas.
That's a very interesting frame. I never thought of it like that, David.
Well, I always believe that disagreement is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have the courage to speak up, it gets back to emotional intelligence. At a certain point with emotional intelligence, people know you speak up because, especially if you have the same values,
Mm-hmm.
you speak up because you have something to say that might or might not be right, but by airing it, other people will discuss it, explore it,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll either prove to be right or wrong, but you'll accept that because you did it in a safe environment. And by
Yes, and I guess I should clarify. I never thought of the fact that the absence of disagreement is not necessarily a signal that you've exited the norming and forming stages, and that you can actually still be in the storming stage. That's
you can definitely be in storm.
That's the frame I'm saying. That's interesting. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, you got people vying with I think I can do that better. Talking in cliques or talking to the manager. I want that job. So there's still that competition going on. There's still that positioning going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the storming stage. Norming is we've all agreed on the objectives. We agreed on how we're going to behave. And now let's go do it because there's no vying for position. We're all working together. But to me, when there's a healthy argument going on, there's more norming. And when there's quiet, there could very well be storming.
Yeah, that's what I thought was a very interesting way of looking at it. So thank you for that perspective. Now, in your book, you talk a lot about what you call fit behaviors. Can you walk our listeners through this idea of fit behaviors for an organization?
Yeah, fit behaviors are alluding to what I talked about before. Fit behaviors are the way that work gets executed. Has a pattern, has a rhythm. There's a phenomenology to it. There's a sequence of events. This is how we get things done around here, is how the new employee often hears it. Oh, that's not what we do here. We do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
By identifying those behaviors that behind those norms, you can say that person has the behaviors that fit success in this organization. Not having those behaviors will create that tension of, that's not how we do it around here. That's
Mm-hmm.
not what we want to do. You don't want to create that friction. And so in order to define that, you have to take a step back. And that's what a lot of people don't do in the hiring process.
Yes.
They don't identify those behaviors before they start the interview. So in my approach, you need to define those, list those, and everybody in the interview process has to have the exact same understanding of what they mean.
Mhm.
So we can evaluate it objectively. And that takes away the bias, because if we all see it the same way, whether I like that person or not, whether that person gave me that nanosecond introduction that hit me in the gut, I like this person, which we all do, I can overcome that very easily, because whether I like them or not, damn it, they fit all the behaviors I'm looking for. They're going to make me look good. They're going to be successful.
Mhm.
I need to hire that person. And similar, like in the book, I talk about how they were looking for engineers when they started to grow the company. And one of the general manager said to me, normally he was very strict about the skill and knowledge criteria.
Mhm.
And I said, listen, you got a year to teach people different aspects of the job before they have to really start to get involved. You're looking for leaders at this point. You're looking for people who have those value behaviors. And one gentleman came in and he didn't have the exact engineering background,
Mhm.
but he blew him away with the behaviors.
Mhm.
And he said to me, he was one of the people I was adamant about hiring,
Mhm.
even though a year ago I would have never hired him, because he didn't have that strict, round peg, round hole. This is the engineering degree I want. This is the experience I want. So I would have passed on him. But now that I actually interviewed him for behaviors, I realized, A, he can learn that stuff. And it's not as important as a leader for him to get along. So it's those fit behaviors that became the criteria to hire him. He turned out to be one of the best employees he had. And
so there's this area of values-based hiring. Is this something that's specific to one part of the globe, or does this have an element of universality to it?
It's universal. I've taught behavioral interviewing in the Gulf region. I've taught behavioral interviewing in Southeast Asia, Europe, all over North America. So I've seen it as a universal. The problem is it gets a bad reputation, behavioral interviewing,
Mhm.
because people don't go in with a concrete understanding of the behaviors they're looking for and stick with those during the selection process. They kind of fluctuate, or they get impressed by somebody and they let that prejudice of the impression override a fair evaluation of what they actually said. Because you really have to, and one of the ways of doing that I found is to always do panel interviews of 3.
Mhm.
Because when you're doing a panel interview of 3, you have 3 people hearing the information at the same time. And therefore, by having a consensus discussion around the answers and not a simple vote and 2 votes went out over 1, I've seen where the outlier has said, this is what I heard, this fits the behavior, this is why I think he's a good or candidate or not a good candidate. And the other 2 have agreed with it and understood it and changed their mind on it. And it was a successful hire. Now, behavioral interviewing, like all interviewing, is not 100% perfect.
Mhm.
But we do know from research that a structured, well-defined behavioral interview gives you about 80% of the information to make a good hire. And a gut feeling, traditional one-on-one interview only gives you 13% of the information to make a good hire. So if I was gambling, I'd rather gamble with a 80% odds than a 13% odds. And
Indeed.
so if nothing else, it makes more sense to do good structured behavioral interviewing.
All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate that, David. Well, we're going to pause for a moment to acknowledge the sponsor of the Keep Leading podcast. If a single employee's indecision can cost an organization $10,000 to $1 million, imagine the potential financial impact when more individuals are added to this indecision equation. It can spiral out of control quickly. What's the solution? Decision X. Decision X is a bespoke on-demand service designed to help your leaders overcome indecision and move forward with their work. Visit Papillon MDC and discover how you can help your team get unstuck, shift perspective, and advance today. Papillon MDC. That's Papillon MDC. Those are my friends out of Canada. So grateful for their long-term support of the Keep Leading podcast. And don't forget, this episode will not only live on social media, on your favorite social media site, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, but it's also available wherever you download podcasts. You will be able to download this and also watch the video on Spotify, but it'll be on Apple, Audible, and any place else that you get your podcasts. So tune in. And also the C-Suite Network. Don't forget the C-Suite Network because this podcast is a part of C-Suite Radio. Well, David, I'm definitely enjoying talking to you about your book. And for those who may just be joining us, it's called Selecting the Best, Fostering a Workforce Driven by Values for Lasting Success. Well, here's one thing that people who are listening may wonder about. You've talked about the different countries that you've spoken in and that you've shared this concept with, but you've also done this with different levels of leaders. Can you tell us one single thread that you think really goes through that everyone should know about?
One single thread that goes through it is people don't realize the power of behavior, because we have all been trained that our skill and our knowledge is what drives success, and that people, once they realize that there's a behavioral component, which really is the switch that says, I'm getting along with this person, I have time for this person, I'm going to help this person. It's not because they have the knowledge of the job usually, unless they're some outstanding guru that you tolerate no matter what, but those are even bad. Those become real issues. So that becomes a real issue. The other thing that I find, especially with leaders, when I talk about, there are people that fit the organization's values, have the skill and knowledge to do the job. Those I call stars of the organization. There's those that don't have the behaviors and don't have the skill and knowledge. Those are deadwood, but yet why are we keeping them in the organization? Because they're dragging people down. There's those that have the skill and knowledge but don't have the behavior, and they are really difficult. I call those viruses, because what happens is they're really successful. They have the skill and knowledge, they have the experience, they have the network, they become really successful. But because they have usually counter behaviors, the organization is really suffering internally because of that. And then there's the keepers, which surprises people. They're the people that have the behaviors, but not the skill and knowledge. I say, find them, relocate them to the area where they have the skill and knowledge to do the job, or educate them, reskill them, redevelop them, because they have the behavior. And if you get rid of them, people think you can get rid of anybody. So I call those, that's kind of like shooting Bambi's mother, shooting those keepers. So keep those around. And when people start to realize that, no matter what level they're on, people start to begin, maybe this behavior stuff has an impact on the job. And in the book, I talk about how the company in Texas, for a variety of reasons, goes into bankruptcy and had to close down for a while. And when they restarted and came out of bankruptcy because they were reconstituted by a new company, a lot of the people had moved away from Corpus Christi that were working there that they wanted back. And they brought me down doing some more work. And I was talking to some of these people, and I was pleasantly surprised, because that's what generated writing the book, is some of the people, a lot of the people came back at a lower salary, One gentleman came back from Seattle and moved on his own to Seattle, moved back to Corpus Christi, Texas on his own, and took a 25% cut in salary
Wow.
to do that. And I said to him, why'd you do that? And he said, I've worked in organizations in the oil industry, in the military for years. This is the only place I worked at that the leadership was always there to work with you, always had your back, and was always helpful. And what they said they were going to do is what they did. And it was a pleasure working here with them. And I wanted to come back to that because I've never found that before. And he was willing to move, and moving cross country is not easy, move back on his own and take that 25% salary cut. And he wasn't the only one. So that's what I'm saying when and they only found him because they did the behavioral interview.
Mm-hmm.
The skill and knowledge, he'd get the job anywhere. He was brilliant at his job. So he had no trouble finding a job. He had a really good job in Seattle, but he moved back because of the environment, the work experience, the employee experience. And that employee experience is the foundation for strong employee engagement and for strong commitment and strong productivity, because you build that. So having that environment is where I believe organizations thrive.
Very good. Very good. Well, David, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today about selecting the best. Where can listeners learn more about you?
They can either join me on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn like everybody else. They can find my company page at sagltd.com, and they can buy the book, which is available at online booksellers everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being with us and again sharing your knowledge about your latest book. Author of 3 books, and so when they look you up on Amazon, they'll see your other 2 books that you've written about, and how the cohesiveness of what you've been talking about for the last 40 years shines through. Thank you again, and thank you for listening. I'm Eddie Turner, reminding you that leadership is not about our title or our position. Leadership is about action. Leadership is an activity. It's not a garment that we put on or take off. We must be a leader at our core and allow it to shine in everything that we do. So whatever you're doing, always keep leading.